Sabbatical is something very new to Grace and certainly very new to me. Never done anything like that before. It's an ancient practice, one that's prescribed in a variety of places in scriptures. There would even be rest prescribed for the land. God deeply values rest and begins the work of the kingdom of heaven always from a place of rest. Even before creation, the world was still and it was dark. And as God began to step in and work, he began with rest. He created all things, and then he ended with rest. Now, rest isn't necessarily sleep or just stopping doing anything, but it's an intentional disconnect. It's intentional rest and observe and be encouraged and equipped. And in the case of God, to rule and reign over all that he has done for us, it's so that we can reconnect with the one who rules and reigns over us, and do so with those that God has placed closest to us. In our case, my wife and baby girl. And so 2 months of sabbatical was something I was quite intimidated about. While we do have rhythms of rest in our life, it's probably like yours. It's kind of here and there, and we squeeze it in when we can. And I mean, I love getting to do what I do. And really, this is what I know best in life, is the work of ministry and church leadership and just general organizational management. And this is the first time in my life that I could remember since probably, before middle school, that I had anything that looked anything like a summer break where there was no expectations of me, and I kind of got to roll out my own plan. Now, for us as a church, and it being sabbatical related to soul care and reconnecting with the Lord, reconnecting with Ansley, we approached it with a plan, and the plan didn't go quite as planned, but it turned out beautiful. Just to give you an idea of some of the things that we did, and I would have loved to have talked about this on a weekend with everybody present, but this gives a chance for me to just embellish a little bit more, and maybe even you can drop questions to us or send them to us at office@gbc.life, and I'll do my best to respond. But the sabbatical really had three main elements: rest and refreshment, which needs to happen for all of us, soul care and solitude, which was kind of meant to be the centerpiece, and then kind of this reintegration, reimplementation, like what is it that God's been showing you throughout the first two segments of sabbatical, and what's the game plan to put this into action? Now, I wasn't going at this alone. Naturally, Ansley was very much a part of this with me, and she, being the great leader she is, was involved with asking me questions and challenging me and kind of calling me to the carpet on some areas that I needed to be more intentional. But also had a sabbatical coach, as I mentioned to you guys, was one of the great leaders and pastors and shepherds and Bible teachers, in my opinion, on planet Earth, Dr. Randy Smith. You can check out some of his stuff at thewanderingshepherd.com. But he spends most of his time in the Middle East. He was willing to give time to me to just oversee me and challenge and coach me. And that really paid some big dividends for me. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But very quickly, I was advised to very quickly in the sabbatical not to just breathe, not to just stop for a couple of weeks and just relax, because that intentional unintentionality would yield poor dividends in the long run of sabbatical. I was advised by Dr. Randy, like, you need to start day one on the things that the Lord has told you to do and the rhythms that God has called you to establish and that we and your elders have agreed on, to make sure you're making the most of this. If anything, pull back later. Be more intentional up front, pull back and rest more later. And so took his advice on that for sure. And I really spent within about a week and a half, I was up at the top of a mountain, literally, not figuratively, but up at the top of a mountain in North Carolina, in just solitude. I was by myself for about 4 days in total. I even drove up there, obviously by myself, but I didn't listen to the radio on the way up there. I wasn't on the phone. I called Ansley a few times to check in, but it was just me. Me and the Lord, me and my thoughts, me and praying. And that resulted in me arriving at this mountain and spent 4 days alone before the Lord, starting and ending my day in the scriptures every day. And then I would have 3 to 4 segments during the day where I would read some Christian literature that the Lord had led me to be a part of. It was actually Practicing the Way, which you guys have been going through as a church anyways. I went through Practicing the Way and another book about being a godly and good father for Marigold. And I'd journal. I would force myself to journal after every single segment, at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, and everyone in between. Something I despise doing, but quite frankly is one of the healthiest things you could ever do in your life. And it was good for me too. I wrote about 25 pages of just single-spaced, journaled thoughts, whatever was on my heart and mind, whatever God was saying, whatever questions I had or thing I was struggling with or revelation I got in the moment. And 4 days of that. And then Ainsley and the baby joined me for a few days of just being there together in the quiet and enjoying being there with one another. And I'll be honest with you, kind of that first segment, I was expecting to have some big revelation. I wasn't expecting God to give us new direction. I feel like God spoke 6 years ago and told us that we are to saturate the heartland with the good news of the gospel, and spoke 3 years ago that that's not only going to be happening through life-on-life discipleship and apprenticing, but it's also going to happen through church planting, church revitalization, and multi-siting Grace Bible. And I feel like God's been clear on that, and frankly, we're way over our head already walking in God's design. And so I wasn't expecting some big directional thing, of which God did not give. But I guess I was expecting an emotional thing, you know, kind of a summer camp high to some degree, maybe a conference-like experience where God just did something in me or spoke something in me, and I felt his nearness, because I have felt that before many times. And in a time about 5 years ago that I did just this, I got on top of a mountain and just got before the Lord. And I guess I kind of expected to hear the thunder quake with the voice of God. But I think much like we see in the scriptures, his voice wasn't in the thunder, it wasn't in the lightning or in the earthquake. It was in a still small voice, one that I, quite frankly, even in the solitude, was not hearing. But I kept downloading with Dr. Randy, I kept downloading with Ainsley, and we moved on to the next segments of the sabbatical. In the second segment, we did some rest and some things that we knew would really allow us to be replenished and flourish. I did a little bit of fishing. I did a lot of exercise. I continued to read. I continued to pray. Ainsley and I continued to talk. Also met with Dr. Randy. And we served together. There's an incredible camp called Camp Joy. It meets up in Lake Wales once a year, and it's a camp that is for people from 16 years old to infinity that have special needs. And so Ainsley went and served, and I went and served at Camp Joy for a day. Just to love on the campers as they were coming in and getting registered. We got to know a lot of them and their families, do some arts and crafts. It was just a beautiful day of us getting to serve together and getting to join our ministries together in a unique way that we don't usually get to do in just the grind of vocational church ministry. So that was a sweet moment. We also did a little bit of visiting of some other multi-site churches that are like us but are way out in front of us, churches I would consider gold standards. I mean, they're writing the book, they're teaching the conferences on how to do this well operationally, but how to do it effectively gospel-wise to make sure that the kingdom impact expands, not just the footprint of the real estate of the church. And we were able to glean some good stuff from there. Honestly, one of the biggest takeaways I had when it comes to that experience was about 2 weeks ago. We were in Troy, Alabama at a Highlands, Church of the Highlands location. It's a college campus where it meets. It was spring break. The town is empty in Troy if there's no college students there. So I was expecting to show up to this multi-site campus and it be empty, but it wasn't. There were lots of people there of all ages, kids everywhere. Just a vibrant, joyful place to be going to church. And I walked into the worship center. I don't know what I expected, but I walked to the theater of the college, which was the worship center, at least temporarily till they get their own facility. And we were in one of the two services. We were in the early service, and there was almost 300 people in that room, like intimately engaging in worship and with one another and with what the pastors were saying and teaching. And what was powerful about that to me, and peculiar at the same time, being from a rural context, is the whole service was on video. Now, it was live streamed in, but it was no different than their online live stream that they could have watched on their couch. And here we are, these people got up, got dressed, got their kids ready, drove through the rain to come to church, to watch the whole experience on a screen. And I realized very quickly, they aren't watching this experience on a screen. They're having an experience together. It's just a screen that's providing the content. And they had church in there. I was encouraged by that. But something that stood out to me about that is how desperate communities are around the country to have thriving, gospel-centered, Jesus-loving, people-loving, community-loving church environments. That these folks are willing to go out of their way to get the content off a screen for the sake of powerful, life-giving gospel community. And that really just kind of doubled down in Ansley and my heart, the need for us to continue to allow God to expand what He is doing through the family of grace all throughout the heartland as we saturate, and how important it is to multi-site and church plant, having different mission stations all throughout the rural context of our area, instead of investing in just building bigger buildings and trying to warehouse more Christians in larger facilities. We need more small, intentionally placed locations for people to experience Jesus and His life transforming power and His forgiveness and His resurrection, and experiencing one another. That recipe is what will continue to change the world and saturate the heartland with the good news of the gospel. We had some sweet moments of refreshment. We had lots of windshield time driving to and from these different places. But probably the most significant moment spiritually for me, there were two. One of which I had with my brother, with him just leading me through some prayers of healing in my own heart for some things that I have carried since probably my childhood. More about that at a later time. But one of the most significant ones that really is going to impact my hands and my feet in the coming days and years of my life was the last conversation I was having with Dr. Randy. And we were deep into the sabbatical at this point. I mean, I'm rounding the corner of having about a week and a half to 2 weeks left. And honestly, I was expecting something different. I was expecting to have been at that point at a place of newness and refreshment and revelation and all these good things of having intentionally tilled the soil of my heart and mind and life and rhythms. And I told Randy, I said, man, as I look back over this, like, there are a lot of good things that happen. And I've spent a lot of time with the Lord, and I've spent a lot of time with Ansley and the baby, and I've prayed a lot, and I've read a lot. And so I know that there is good in all of this. So I'm not trying to discount that. But if I'm honest, I don't know that I can say that I have heard God speak. I mean, I'm 6 weeks deep into sabbatical, and I feel like the only one being silent is the Lord. And Randy paused for a second, Dr. Smith, and he said, Dustin, what are you talking about? He says, God has spoken to you. And I'm like, well, please tell me what He said, because I'm missing it. And Randy began to speak to this common thread that I didn't even realize I had been speaking to all throughout my engagements with him. And he says, God is speaking to you in your life a word of intentionality. He says, God is calling you as a shepherd and as a pastor to be a more relationally intentional person with the people, like Jesus and His 12 disciples, that God has placed immediately around you. Now, that may not sound like much of a revelation to you, whoever's watching this conversation. But to me, it's exactly what I needed to hear, and it broke my heart. Because I know, and some of y'all may have picked up on this if I'm being completely transparent with you, that maybe it's because I'm an introvert, which I know seems peculiar because I get on a stage in front of a crowd of people. But I'm an introvert. If you ever try to talk to me one-on-one or in a small group, I'm very awkward. I don't get energy from being in crowds of people. I get energy from being alone or just being with Ansley. But because of that, whether it's because of my introvertedness or whether it's because of coming up on 17 years in vocational ministry or whether it's because of Grace being a large church in a small community and how autonomy is out of the question for Ansley and I, if we go to the grocery store or out to dinner or whatever, it's beautiful to be in that environment, but it comes with challenges, especially compounded over the years. And so I think I've set up a bunch of guardrails in my life to try to protect myself from people, including the people that are closest to me. And I think what God was showing me, what I had done, is create strategies and systems to continue to be effective in the world of ministry, while at the same time removing myself from having to be too relationally engaged with anybody, even the people, like I said, right in my in my immediate circle. And Randy told me what was such a revelation, I don't know how, because it's right there in the scriptures, but praise God that the Spirit pointed it out to him and has revealed it to me, and I want to tell it to you. He said, never forget that Jesus was a master strategist, clearly. I mean, he turned the world on its head in less than 3 years of ministry, and we haven't got over it, and it continues to expand. He told 72 of his followers, this is exactly what I want you to do, exactly where I want you to go, exactly how long to stay, exactly what to say, exactly what not to do, what not to take with you as you go into these villages and do ministry on their own. He gave them a very clear, very succinct, bulletproof strategy to do the work, and he turned them out to do that on their own. But at the same time, Randy said, and this is what crushed me, don't forget that when John wrote about Jesus, John referred to himself as the disciple who Jesus loved. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. The master strategist was also a master relationalist and cared deeply about the ones that were in his immediate circle and that he had put in his immediate circle, his 12, and then even more so with the 3, Peter, James, and John. He poured his life into them. The Apostle Paul said this to the church of Thessalonica, and he said, not only do I come to you with the gospel of God, but we come pouring our lives into you. That's convicting to me. And I bet that's probably why the disciples often argued about who was the greatest, because every one of them felt like they were. Every one of the people in Jesus' closest circle felt like they were the main one that he loved the most. And John just had the audacity to write about it. I want to be the kind of shepherd and leader that doesn't just work with our team to develop brilliant strategies, hopefully brilliant strategies by the wisdom of the Spirit to continue to expand the kingdom footprint throughout the heartland. But I want to be the kind of leader that when I spend time with people, whether it's our closest circle and I'm spending a lot of time with them, or whether it's somebody in our church family or community, I'm just spending a few minutes with them, I want them to walk away feeling like I'm the disciple that Dustin loves. I want to be that intentional, that in tune. And honestly, I can't, in my flesh, I cannot do that. I tend to be cold. I tend to be introverted. I don't always know what to say. It's going to take a work of the Spirit of God in my life. That was part of the revelation that came from my time with my brother that I mentioned before. But that's really what I seek to do. And I believe very much so that in God doing that to me and through me, it's going to only benefit the lives in my immediate circle of leaders and people that God has placed around me, and is only going to pour out from there. And let's be honest, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And imagine being a part of a church that's culture was so deeply entrenched with love and intentionality and care that it would become irresistible. People want to be a part of a group of people that are like that. And many of you already are. Many of our staff already are. And I need to learn. I need to learn what it looks like, and I need to trust God to show me the way. But I want to become every bit of that to the glory of God and the good of those who are around me. Coming back from sabbatical has been a little bit of whiplash, as you might imagine. It's like jumping on a moving train, even though we had some safeguards in place so that it wasn't too abrupt. But coming in, especially with Easter just a few days away, it's almost like taking time away during the playoffs just to show up for the Super Bowl. It's it's a little intimidating, I'll be honest, and I feel a lot of weight, but I continue to hear the Spirit reminding me, this thing that I am doing and will do does not center around you, and it never has, and it never will. And so I can relieve myself of the nervousness and pressure, and I can trust the Spirit of God to do whatever it is that He plans to do in me and you and in this community. But I am asking the Lord to bring about many to faith in Him. And that for those of us that have walked in faith with Him for a long time, that He would break down some of the stony walls that maybe we've built over time like I had, and show us how to walk in a freedom and a newness of life that only He can provide. I don't know what it is for you, but that's a little piece of what it was for me. But I can assure you, much like in my season of getting before the Lord, if you get before Him and you lay yourself on the altar before Him and present yourself as the living sacrifice and invite Him to show you whatever He wants to show you and do in you whatever He wants to do in you, He will. That's a prayer He will always answer. He's crazy about you. I love you guys, and those of you that have listened up to this point, God bless you for listening to me ramble, and thank you for listening. If you do have some questions, I'll do my best to try to answer them in other formats. You can email or we can talk in person. But I love y'all, and thank you for continuing to be supportive as we discipline ourselves as a leadership team to rest the pastors and families and key leaders of the Grace Bible Church family. God bless y'all.